This is the Breakfast Leadership Podcast. Boundaries or burnout, you make the choice. Here's your host, Michael Levitt. Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Podcast. It's Michael here, and today I've got a very special human being on the line, Ed Squire. Welcome to the show.
Michael, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. We met back in February 2019 at the New Media Summit, and your story and your journey, especially the journey that you're on now, is huge. And one of the things that impresses me most about you, I mean, there's a ton of things, and I found out earlier you're Canadian, so that's bonus points as well. But nothing against my American friends. I'm American too, okay? Yes, but anyway. What's crucial is the fact that you've learned and continue to learn how to go through life and pick up different ways to approach things based on what happened in your life in the past and how you've grown with it. So tell the story best you can, and whatever you're comfortable with of your journey, what's going on, and some of the things that you're doing today.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate you having me on the show, and that I sincerely mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's a wonderful privilege, and I love the work you do, what you teach, and what you stand for, your platform. So it's a real honor to be here and have this opportunity. So, like you said, I'm Canadian, like you are, but I've lived in the U.S. Since 2003. And the majority of my career, I've been a strategic business consultant for Fortune 500 companies in the United States, Canada, and Europe, and mostly working with CIOs and upper level management, and teaching them how to improve their business processes and how to maximize efficiency and put industry best practice standards into their organizations. And these are global companies, so they're not mom and pop shop type of organization. So it's been an amazing career to be able to do something like that. And it sounds impressive. And I say that because I used to really hang my identity on what I did as a job and a career as opposed to who I was as a person. And that's really what my journey is all about, and what everything has happened in my life brought me to that point. And it's kind of like a mixture of, if you've ever seen Leonardo DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can. So I've learned to adapt and overcome, and if I found a way that I could get paid a six-figure salary, well, I'll just Google that and figure out how to do it. And if they figure out that I really don't know what I'm doing, well then they'll let me go, but they still have to pay me for the time I was there, and that's a very stressful way to run a career. But eventually I did become very good at what I did. But the problem was, why would somebody pursue a career like that? Why would you not just get into something that you're educated for, you're certified in, and maybe you have a passion for it? I mean, that's what normal people do we not? And for me, I've been in flight or in fight or flight mode all my life, because my real story, where everything stems from, is childhood sexual abuse that I experienced from the ages of 4 till 10 by 3 different men. And that's a huge issue in our culture today, as everybody knows. And, that really kind of overshadows everything that I've done in my life, and brought me to where I am now with my nonprofit and us meeting at the New Media Summit. And now I'm on I'm on a true journey of a life that I enjoy, and of loving and liking the person that I've become. And I'm in business doing something I have a passion about, and I get to use all of the skills that I've learned in my professional career, and now it's in service to other people, and it's doing good in the community and for our culture. And that's really a snapshot of everything in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, your story definitely, I remember when you shared it. And for those that aren't familiar, the New Media Summit has around 200 people attend the conference. And, you sharing your story, I know, resonated with a lot of people. And I agree. Unfortunately, it's childhood sexual abuse is something that is, unfortunately prevalent. We hear about it, and from a personal story, and I've not shared this before now, but a very good friend of mine, his brother, was recently arrested, accused of CSA, and again, I don't know the circumstances behind it. It was in the newspaper back home, and I feel for everyone involved. Because when I found out about it, it hit me as if it was my own brother, and my friend I've known for 40 something years. So it's for the family and for the victims and everybody involved, it's a tough situation, but it happens, and it's horrible that it does. But I think one of the things, and we talked about this briefly in the pre-show, was how not so distant past, you were able to get past the victim mentality, and that is not easy. What happened to you, and no one can sugarcoat this. It was absolutely horrible, and no one would second guess you at all if you chose to continue to choose this, and you're not diminishing what happened, but the mindset of being a victim of this situation, and you've changed your mindset on this, and talk a little bit about that, and I'm guessing it wasn't easy to do that.
No, Michael, it took me my entire life up until, actually, this is just before we, got on the call together. I was looking at Facebook, and I realized that today is a major, major anniversary for me. 3 years ago today, I was in my hometown in Prince George, and I was asked by a childhood friend of mine. Her name was Heather Young. She asked me to come and speak at a book signing event and a book reading event that she was going to do in my hometown in Prince George. And the reason why she was asking me to come and speak was because her book was, it chronicled, to the best of her recollection, everything she did to try to prevent her brother, Jim Young, who was a childhood friend of mine I grew up with. We lived on the same street. They lived just down a few houses down. Jim ended up committing suicide at age 25, and he was sexually abused by the same teacher that abused me, and this teacher abused many, many boys, and nobody ever spoke out about this, and I kind of ignored Jim's death all my life. When I heard about it, I was actually living in Florida in the late 90s, and I heard that this had happened, and I knew why Jim had done that, and I just put it out of my mind. I think a lot of survivors, we do our best just to get on with it. We do our best to forget it. We do our best to become, overcome these things, and we do our best to, either think or maybe do what we can so that it doesn't affect our lives and who we are. So we live in a place where we're okay, and we're really, what happens is we build a life around ourselves where we're safe. And so she had written this book and invited me to come back to Prince George and speak. And I did. And I hadn't been home for many, many years. And there I was standing in front of a couple hundred people. And I began sharing my story of what this guy had done. And I wasn't in therapy for this. I didn't pursue any psychological help. I was never ashamed to talk about it to a certain degree, but I kept myself safe from a certain level of detail, the things that really were really hurtful and shameful. And it was May 30th, 3 years ago. And then 4 weeks after I spoke at that event, I ended up on disability with post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety and depression. And I was used to being a high-end corporate consultant for Fortune 500 companies. And suddenly I found myself unable to concentrate enough to do my job. Something was seriously happening in my head. And so, to get to answer your question, how do you get out of that victim mode? And a lot of people ask these days, why does it take so many years for someone to come out and say something that they were abused so many years ago? And I understand why that is. And in most cases, it's because you're triggered by something, an event, a happening, a conversation, a memory, something triggers, and all of a sudden the memories that you had and the impact of that trauma begins to flood your brain. And it's proven in neurology that your brain actually is impacted and it's physiologically changed through trauma. Whether you could even be just you could be a service member in war, and you experience post-traumatic stress disorder, your brain gets impacted. And so for me, what happened was, I found myself unable to do my job, and then I began to question, why is this happening? What is going on with me? Why can't I get my act together? What, I'm okay. Maybe I'm having a midlife crisis at the same time. It's a combination of midlife crisis. I've been divorced for about 6 or 8 years, and I'm dealing with these things from the past. Clearly, I need a break. But it was more than that. So over the next couple of years, this is only 3 years ago, right? So over the next couple of years, I got into very intensive therapy, psychological therapy, and working with psychiatrists, a mental health therapist, and began to understand the impact of what happens to an individual's brain when these things happen at the various stages of life that they can happen. And for me, it began at age 4 and continued until 10 by 3 different men. And what happens is physiologically, your brain is impacted by that trauma to the point of where, in a lot of cases, you slow down or stop the maturity that you would normally have if you weren't abused or suffer from that trauma. And so that as you grow older, you have this gap between what you look like as a human being and how you think and emotionally act internally. And your outward world looks very different than how you feel on the inside, and you wonder what's wrong with you. But it's a silent, it's a very silent personal pain that you deal with. And so, by the time this happened 3 years ago, I dug into it and I began to realize, hey, number one, I understand it's not my fault. When you understand that, but you really internalize that, then you have to grapple with the fact that, okay, if let's say you were run over by a car, you were just standing there, it wasn't your fault. The reality is now you've got maybe 2 broken legs or a broken pelvis. You can't ignore the damage that's been done. So now what do? You're a victim, right? And you really are. It's not your fault this happened, but the reality is, hey, I got broken bones and broken legs and whatnot. When it comes to mental health, you don't see it externally like that. When I walk into a room, it doesn't look like there's anything wrong with me. And so now how do you come to terms with, okay, this happened to me, I am now broken and I need to get fixed. How do you overcome that? And Michael, there's no simple answer. I think for me, it was a combination of educating myself as to what the impacts were from this sort of thing, and getting the mental health, getting the therapy that I did, understanding the diagnosis that I had, getting on the right medication to help me manage and deal with things day by day, and just staying on a constant program of understanding what happened, coming to find out who I am and how do I get out of the victim mode and get my life back. And that's what I've done over the last 3 years. And 1 year ago, which is another great anniversary, 1 year ago, I started a nonprofit called Me Too What Now? And it's a video-based nonprofit where I create videos on this topic, and I do it in a very unique and different way. I do it in a way that I couldn't find was available online, and I thought this could be helpful or useful to other survivors. And 1 year later, it turns out it has been, for me, it's been more wildly successful than I ever anticipated. And so, the combination of all these things and getting busy and not looking at myself as a victim anymore, and getting out of the internalizing that and understanding that I do have control over my life. I can take the mess that my life has become, and I can make something beautiful out of that. And it takes work. And so there's no quick and easy answer, but that's the process that I've gone through in the last number of years. And I can honestly say I don't have any regrets. And that's a difficult thing to say because it changed my entire life. But I don't have any regrets because I think I know myself at a deeper emotional and psychological level than I ever would have known if this didn't happen to me. And I look at that as being a gift because I don't think a lot of people really know who they are deep down inside at that level. And I love that. And then when you connect with other people, like I love listening to Lisa McDonald on the previous podcast, and I just totally connect with her. I understand what she's saying, and with knowing that there's a ebb and flow to life, and there's a path of least resistance, and that's where your journey should go. And there's no struggle in the path of least resistance, and so life has become something I wake up every morning looking forward to, and I'm thankful for every day. So that's my story.
It's an amazing and hero's journey is not, I'm not saying that tongue in cheek. It demonstrates, what you've done and what you've accomplished and, the realization, especially, after you went back home and the PTSD or CPTSD that came about from that, you took action. And you said, okay, I need to deal with this. And you had a team of people because oftentimes people will unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, will just go to their doctor and their doctor will prescribe them 30 milligrams of whatever. And that's that. And you went through a series of different medical professionals working along the way, using medication as a tool to help you progress through these experiences and the PTSD in a way that would get you to where you are now. And unfortunately, I see too many people will get prescribed something, antidepressant or anti-anxiety or something along those lines, and that's where it stops. And they don't deal with the the psychological things and like you had discussed, when something like this happens at the ages that it happened to you, your brain will not match up from a maturity standpoint as where you are physically. And it's almost, and maybe this is a bad example, but oftentimes I think of, in situations like this where the brain and where you are in two different places, it's like things are out of sync. And
absolutely, that's a very good way of putting it. Yes.
And presenting yourself in the world, and working with corporations and executives and all of that kind of stuff to the point where you weren't able to do anything. At first blush, you're like, what in the world's going on? And that had to be one of those things where you're like, this is strange, and you start going through your brain. It's like, okay, did I take something? Did I eat something weird? Why am I in this mode? And the fact that you had the wherewithal to figure out, okay, something is not right here, and I need to do something about it, speaks volumes to your own self-care and the ability to do the things you do.
We'll be back to the show in a moment, but first I want to let you know today's show is brought to you by our wonderful sponsor, Cloud HQ. With Cloud HQ, you get access to over 20,000 influencers that have been curated by brands just like yours. If you're a brand, you know how difficult it is to find and connect with the influencers that your audience already knows and trusts. That's why I suggest you get Cloud HQ. When you sign up today, you get access to over 20,000 influencers on Instagram. You can see loads of data about their profile and engagement rates before you reach out, and you have direct access to their contact information so you can reach out to them on or off the platform. When you reach out to them on the platform, they offer automation tools so you can reach out to a bunch of those influencers at one time. This will save you a lot of time, and I guarantee it'll pay for itself in the first year. For Breakfast Leadership listeners, I'm offering a special discount. Normally, an enterprise subscription would go for over $1,500 a year. My friends at Cloud HQ are offering a subscription for just $499 a year. That's a savings of over $1,000. You can sign up today by using the discount code BREAKFAST and save, like I said, over $1,000 a year. Cloud HQ is a wonderful option for any brands that are looking to influence their marketing and looking to get their program off the ground. So sign up today using the link in our show notes and use the code BREAKFAST and let me know what you think. Like I said, I guarantee it'll pay for itself in its first year. Cloud HQ is an amazing offer, and it's a good option for anybody that's interested in influencer marketing. Now back to the show.
Yeah, and and this is what I base my mission and my vision on for my nonprofit. I think the biggest thing that holds people back is the fear and the shame and the stigma associated with this. And I mean, I don't think it, I know it. There's no question. I've talked to countless people over the last year and interviewed many people, and it's the number one thing that comes up that prevents people from getting the help that they need. And once you just, I think that the best thing a person can do is find someone to talk to. You don't have to stand in front of your hometown group, and do a presentation like I did and traumatize yourself. But really it started for me it was earlier in the previous year. So that was in May of 2016. But in the previous December, I met a gentleman who became a good friend of mine, and he owned a nonprofit that helped men overcome the trauma of divorce, particularly if you had children, and how do you deal with that? And he's the first person that I ever sat with, and he said to me, we were in a Starbucks, and he goes, "So Ed," he says, "tell me your story. Tell me all about you." And I thought, you know what? I just feel safe with this guy. I like what he does, and I trust him. And I thought, you know what? For the first time, I'm going to unload, and I'm going to tell this guy everything. And I did, and everything came out, and he didn't bat an eye at my story, which surprised me, because I thought, man, this is, when you hear my real story, it's just, I've always, survivors, when it first comes out, you just want to, you tend to dramatize, and I think rightly so, because of the impact it's had on your life, and you're finally getting it off your chest. But it just was so wonderful that I shared all this stuff. He sat there, he didn't say a word. At the very end, he said, Ed, I really appreciate you sharing your story with me, and let's get together again. I'd like to do that. And I said, okay, and he left. And that was the first time I ever really, really came out like that. And I think that's really what opened up the doors for me for everything. Everything happened after that I never tried to make happen. And, everything from getting involved with a great mental health care team. And I even got into group therapy, because I learned that is a very important part of recovery. And I thought, a group therapy, oh my God, that means like getting in front of a group of guys that have gone through this. I don't want to do that. And, but I knew that it was necessary. So I would ask myself, why don't you want to do that? Like, what are you afraid of? There couldn't be a safer place than another group of guys going through the same thing. But it boils back to fear and shame. So I forced myself to go, and I forced myself to engage in the activities that I knew cognitively, this is what you do to recover. But emotionally, oh my God, it's something I don't want to do, but I want to get better. So I started going to group therapy. And it was, once I got started, it was wonderful. And everything that I've done as a part of my recovery that was difficult and shameful, I no longer, nothing is difficult or shameful anymore. There's, things are difficult. You still overcome things day to day, but certainly not to the degree that they used to be when I got started. But it's important to find out, what do you need to do? How do I get better? And the first thing I think is just finding someone safe to talk to.
It's crucial. And once you feel a place that's safe to share your story and with people that either or like in the situation when you shared it for the first time, someone that was completely non-judgmental, didn't blink, thanked you. And he was genuine with that, because it's one of those things where, and I've had people tell me things, and, my reaction was the same. So, thank you for trusting me, for you to share your story with me. And it means a lot to the person that's receiving the story, because there's that element of trust going, okay, this person just shared something that is as vulnerable as you get. I mean, short of, cutting open your chest and saying, here's my heart, you pierce it once and I'm gone. I mean, that's about the extent of it. And that's it's a very special moment. So I'm thankful that, that gentleman was able to do that. And then also too, I loved how you were able to, get past the, going into a group therapy session going, I don't want to talk in front of these people and all that. But you discovered that, okay, I'm going into a situation with like-minded people, which we all try to be around, but also people that have had similar experiences to you. So they're, it may be a little bit different, time, circumstances, who, and all of that, but ultimately it ends up being a very similar situation. So again, it's safe for you to be able to heal from those things and to, learn others and get past the. And I know this happens, and I talk with people that have been victims of a variety of things. It helps them get past the feeling that you're the only person that have ever gone through
Well, I
this.
mean, you just nailed it, right? You just nailed it. It's I think when you feel like a victim and you share your story, you want somebody to care. You want to impact somebody with your dramatic story, and it is a dramatic story. And you want them to reach out and just say, "I'm so sorry," and that this happened to you, and those are good things, and these are natural. I think these are natural human responses to people's trauma and tragedy in their lives. But as a victim, you're getting what you're looking for, and that is, I want you to feel sorry for me. I want you to feel my pain. And it's a subconscious thing. You feel validated when someone says that. But when someone just simply says, "Thank you for sharing your story," and they're not like blown away by it and feeling sorry for you, it shifts your mind into a different gear. It's like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal to this guy. I mean, he knows everything. Well, it just felt comforting. And with the group therapy, it was the same thing. I'll never forget my first day. I go in there and I get introduced and I get to share my story. So out comes all this drama. This happened and that happened and this and that. And it's all horrible. And all the guys sat there like they're just listening. Right? There's no emotional reaction. There's no like, oh my God, and then when I was done, it was so funny. I never learned. I didn't know what being in the moment was. I never knew what staying present meant. I never knew what these things were. And when I finished, it's kind of my heart was beating, my breath was rapid. And the facilitator, he looks at me, he says, "Are you okay?" And I thought, I'm thinking, well, of course I'm okay. I mean, but my mind was in such rapid motion from unloading all this information in a safe place and not getting a response. I didn't know how to act. And he said, why don't you just, let's sit down. Let's everybody let's just be present for a few minutes. I mean, so that was the follow-up to my big story, right? So there was no questions. There was no, oh my God, it was just, hey, let's all just be present for a moment. And it just took me from this heightened state of unloading my story again in a different environment. And it just brought me down to a place where like, hey, you know what? My story is not that much different than everybody else in this room. That's why nobody's shocked by my story. Some people's stories here are worse than mine, but we all have the same story. We were traumatized. We were abused. We had this happen. It wasn't our fault. And here we are all together, getting better together. And so it just, that was just really, all these steps are what helped get me out of victim mode. And being able to finally say, you know what, I am in control of my life. What do I want to do with my life? And the time that's gone by doesn't matter. And now I get to have a blank canvas in my life and do anything I want. I don't have to follow just the reactions of my life. Like, oh, I need to make a lot of money because that's, I want to be validated by that. And I want people to think I'm a certain professional. I want people to think something of me by what I do and what I make and who I know. And now I can just be who I am, right? That's who I'm defined by, or that's what I'm defined by. It's who I am. It's not by what I do. And that's, I don't know what the percentage of population of people that feel that way about themselves, but I know for me, it was not that way for a long, long time. It's very freeing.
A couple things to bring up there. One, we're going to just be in the moment. Yeah, especially when you share your story in a public setting, your natural inclination is like, okay, what's the reaction going to be? And when you get really no reaction, it's like stoic. And I'll segue in a minute, and I'll make a quick note here um, to say something, a similar experience but different context and all that stuff. But basically, the frame, we're looking for reaction and didn't get anything. But the second thing that really jumped out about it is you can't change the past, and I think too many of us want to repaint things, and even when we've grown and now have accepted and we're living an ideal life and we're enjoying ourselves, oftentimes we see either ourselves or other people like to go down a not so well-known Bob Seger song, but it's one of my favorite ones. It's called Revisionism Street. It's on one of his more recent recordings, and it just talks about how we revise history and we change things to what actually happened to something that feels more comfortable for us. The fact that you're like, okay, I'm painting my life now. I can only paint a future portraits. I can't paint a past portrait. That's done. It's and even now, and I know this happens with me too, is when I look back at my life and things that have happened in my life, they look different to me now than they did 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 10 years ago. They just look different because you have different perspectives and how you approach life and how things happen and how you view things changes over time. So it's absolutely amazing. So real quick on the not getting a reaction. This was probably 13, 14 years ago. And I won't go into the details on how it happened, but basically I delivered a sermon at a Chinese Baptist church for their English portion of their show or their sermon. Okay. So there's like 40 people in the congregation. They're all Chinese. You've seen me. I'm not. So I give this sermon, and throughout the sermon, I'm looking around, looking to see if there's acknowledgement, reaction. It's something I'm saying is resonating with them. And they could have been statues. There was absolutely no reaction whatsoever. So after I finished, I say thank you and wrap it up. And then there was a little coffee thing afterwards. And for like 40 minutes, they're all telling me all of the, things that I said and, what they enjoyed about it and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, so you were listening, but you gave no recognition whatsoever that you were even alive. So it just, whenever I hear about, no reaction, for some reason that popped in my head for some reason, which
you don't know what other people are feeling and experiencing, but just because they're not showing anything.
That's right? True. And that was a life lesson for me. It's like, don't necessarily, if they're smiling, they might be smiling because they, appreciate it, or they could be thinking about something else, or maybe they've got gas. Who knows?
Get off the stage. Can't wait till you get off the stage.
Yeah, exactly. Hold your questions till, afterwards. So.
Oh boy.
So, now, so you're a year into Me Too What Now? And, the content you have on there is amazing. And, and the stuff too is, video captures things. And of course I say this on an audio podcast, but there's something about video when it comes to, teaching content, sharing stories, and connecting people with things or experiences or lessons or whatever the case may be. So what prompted you to do the video route on it instead of just writing blog posts or things like that? What was some of the thinking behind the video angle of things?
Well, I love when people ask me that question because I appreciate the compliment on the videos, and just the fact that I'm into it 1 year, and doing YouTube it's not an easy thing, and trying to grow and trying to get views and trying to make that work, and especially on this topic, childhood sexual abuse. Are you kidding me? Like I couldn't pick the worst topic on the planet to try to be popular at. But after 1 year, and I'm just wrapping up my strategic plan for this coming fiscal year, I've got over what is that, close to 13,000 minutes of views, 110 subscribers, and over I think it's 5,000 unique views, and I've only got 37 videos on the channel. And so by YouTube standards, that is, I'm really happy with those results. It really has shocked me. But to get started in it, I had my worship pastor say to me one time, he said, Ed, he said, you should vlog your recovery and then upload that to YouTube. I think people would be interested in watching that. And I looked at him, I thought, you got to be crazy. I think that's a really dumb idea. Why would I want to do that? First of all, I don't own a camera. I've never made any video, but to put my life of recovery on, I mean, I appreciate that we have a close connection and I tell you all the details, but you think I should put that up on YouTube? For what reason? And so, he's actually on my board of directors, and his name is Aaron Bjorklund. And he really is the kind of one of the main guys who encouraged me to do this. And so what I did was I got a camera, I sat in front of it, and I just thought, okay, well, if I was going to do this, what would I say? And I recorded myself a bunch of times. I looked at it back and I thought, this is ridiculous, because first of all, I look extremely uncomfortable in my skin. I clearly don't have a lot of self-confidence with what I'm doing, and I have nothing of value to say. And then I thought, if I take all the parts out of that video that sound stupid and like I don't know what I'm talking about, and take that and put that together, add some funky music to it, it would actually be a funny blooper reel. And there may not be any value in it, but I know I would laugh at it. So that's what I did. And what happened, Michael, is I went through this process of looking at myself in a video and seeing the uncomfortableness in my own skin that I had, and how I just didn't know who I was. I didn't have self-confidence. And there's nothing better than listening to yourself or watching yourself on video to help you overcome insecurities and nuances about who you are. And then I thought, this is actually a good therapeutic thing for me to do. And then I thought, what is the content like that's out there on YouTube? So I began to research. Of course, my background is in corporate business analysis, strategic business planning and implementation on a global scale for large companies. And I thought, man, what if I applied that experience that I have into this and see what happens? So I found out on YouTube and everywhere else on the internet, for the most part, I really couldn't find any content that was uplifting, for one thing, on this topic. And I couldn't find anything other than really survivors telling their stories, or nonprofits teaching or having a special speaker or a professional, or they're promoting an event or something, but there was nothing interesting to keep me engaged and wanting to come back. And so I decided to find out what makes a YouTuber successful. And it was my number one fear, and my biggest weakness is what you need to be successful at YouTube. And that is, if you're authentic and you're genuine in communicating whatever your story or whatever your product is, that's what it takes to be successful on YouTube. And you can tell by the content on YouTube, it doesn't matter what the topic is. You could be a wonderful person, or you could be not so wonderful. You may have a great product, or you could even be someone who scrapes gum off the sidewalk. And I'm not joking. I searched that on YouTube, scrape gum off the sidewalk. That can't possibly be there. Well, there is. And there's a guy who's got 15,000 views on a video on how to get gum off the sidewalk. He's a city worker in LA or something like that. And he shows other people techniques that he uses to get gum off the sidewalk. And he's just a regular, wonderful person. And so I thought, what if I just applied that attitude in the moment with where I'm at, not trying to pretend to be someone who has overcome all the difficulties, not trying to pretend to be an authority on the topic, but just live, just be myself on YouTube. Maybe interview some other people, maybe just create content that is just my life, and just start putting it out there. And that's what I did. And then I got the idea that, maybe this could be a good idea for a nonprofit. And so now, that my tagline is find yourself, live yourself, give yourself. And those are the three, those really encompass the 5 stages of recovery from trauma, from a clinical perspective that psychologists use. And it's my version of that process put into 3 different categories. And I'm just beginning now this year. Part of my strategy is to build that out and write an ebook on what does it mean to find yourself, live yourself, give yourself. Create a series of videos that talk about that and my experiences with kind of like what we were talking about today. How did I overcome being a victim? How did I overcome telling someone my story for the first time? And these are all steps that I took to find myself and then begin to live myself and then begin to give of my life into society. And that's really the process of recovery. So it's just like you guys were talking about on your previous podcast I was listening to. It's just, these things are just happening for me, and I'm not trying to make them happen. It's a path of least resistance that's taking place. I'm thoroughly enjoying myself, and now I'm making a couple of documentaries. I filed a lawsuit against the school board in British Columbia because there's no statute of limitations there. And also against the teacher. This was a couple of years ago. It wrapped up last year. And when I was in Vancouver, I took my camera equipment and I did some crazy things like set up I had my camera and 2 GoPros at the time. It was all junky equipment. I've got much better equipment now, but I set them up on the streets of Vancouver, and I set up some posters, and I began to interview passersby on the street and asking them what they thought about the school board's decision to ignore this lawsuit. And that became, I posted some of these clips on the internet, and people were like, wow, this should be a documentary. And I'm like, okay, I know nothing about documentaries, but I sure know how to Google. I know how to Google a career. That's what I did in the past. Let me Google how you make a documentary. So I've been working on this for the last year or so, and filmmakers and directors and writers and producers have been coming into my life, and so now I'm actually, creating my first documentary on my lawsuit this year, and I'm going to vlog that journey on my channel of what it's going to take to get that done, and then I have another documentary in the works for the year after that. So things are happening, and that's the story of how I got started and how it's morphed into what it is today.
It's an amazing hero's journey, as I said before, and I look forward to that documentary and also the behind the scenes of how to make it and the lives that it's going to impact. That's what's so crucial to me, and the impact, the ripple effect you're going to have with this is going to be absolutely amazing. So, Ed, where can people find out a little bit more about you and follow this journey on the documentary?
That's an easy answer because I got very lucky with my company name, and it's just Me Too What Now, all one word. Don't separate any of those words. Just Me Too What Now, all in letters. If you just Google that, you'll find my website. You'll find Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. And or just Google my name, Ed Squire, and I suddenly appear to be everywhere. And I would love to connect with people, and I interact with people on a regular basis. And as they say on your YouTube videos, I really appreciate when people subscribe to the channel because it raises my visibility with YouTube's algorithm, and people are able to find me easier, and that's the whole goal. So. I would love for people to just check it out and see what they think about it.
Awesome. And audience, I'll have that information in the show notes. Ed, great to talk with you again. Thank you for everything and for the awesome work that you're doing and continuing to do.
Thanks, Michael.
Until next time, everybody, be well. Hey, it's Michael again. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. If you're like many people, you're dealing with some significant stress and possibly approaching burnout. I know how you feel. In 2009, my burnout led to a year of worst-case scenarios. I do not want that to happen to you. If you go to breakfastleadership.com, you can register for a free webinar on burnout prevention, as well as get a free checklist to have successful mornings. Start off each day the right way. Again, that's at breakfastleadership.com. Also, since you are a loyal podcast listener, I'm asking you to like, rate, and review my podcast on iTunes. I look at all the reviews and appreciate your comments, and it helps other potential listeners discover the content I have on the show. I appreciate you, and thanks again for listening.